Hi, everyone. This is Tori Vandelin with Prevent Connect. You are tuning in to the fourth and final installment of our podcast series with Jess Atkinson and Carissa Gutierrez, two phenomenal communicators and messengers. And they joined us on this four-part series to let us know all their wisdom and more about messaging and communicating about sexual and intimate partner violence prevention. This last part of the podcast, we talk a little bit more expansively about what is messaging and who is media. And Jess and Carissa leave us with their parting takeaways. Enjoy.
So I guess what I'm wondering is I'm trying to think expansively about media because I feel like so often when we talk about like working with media, we're talking about like reporters and like news and newspapers or magazines. But it seems to me like that there are other forms that we should also be thinking about and tapping into. Am I wrong? What do you all think about that?
I'm so glad you brought that up. And I say this as I think Jess and I mentioned, speaking with our peers, with other communicators, this is something that comes up quite often. I would say that before sheltering in place, there was certainly a certain understanding of the way communications worked, of writing press releases, of getting these to local journalists, to getting them in certain syndications. And the truth is that there's this space that used to be lumped together very frequently called social media. And what we're seeing there is that these are real spaces where people do engage with one another and with us. And so how we are getting information into these spaces or how we're communicating with folks requires that we have a better understanding of who is there and how they're engaging with one another. So I apologize if I've sort of gone off on this different rant, but we do see that even, I'll speak for myself, I do see that within this ability to work with journalists, I no longer really need to email one occasionally. I can tag them. I can directly message them. There's greater accessibility. Our own rape crisis centers can do that same work, tag their local policymakers. It has created this space between ourselves and journalists or other influencers in such a way that that space seems to not be non-existent now. And so I really do try to motivate or remind individuals that you should be tagging, you should be engaging with, have those conversations informally as well. These are relationships. But I would say that the landscape of communications is also shifting. And so we, in order for us to make sure our messages are getting across, need to be able to ride that wave and to be able to really build on those opportunities that have been presented. I'm sure I'm missing a few points there, but that has been one of the major things that has come out of this time is the ability to tell stories and to engage our audience and to get information, actually, responses from the people who engage with us from these spaces as well.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts from what you just said. I am really glad you brought this up, Ashley. And I think like it's so relevant in a number of different ways. I think one thing that's true about like traditional media in this era of COVID is that it's incredibly crowded. A global pandemic is a really big deal. And I have found that it's been a lot more challenging for us to get op-eds placed, to get our main messages out there in the way that we were able to in January. And I think that really highlights the opportunity of not relying on the traditional media and why it is so important to be interacting and creating relationships outside of that, whether that is with non-traditional media or blogs or podcasts. And just like thinking about how can we use the many different channels that we have at our disposal to be getting our messages out. So we've been making a more concerted effort to increase our Spanish language communications, and we decided this summer to start a WhatsApp account so that we can get information out through networks through WhatsApp. So working with providers who we know use WhatsApp with their Spanish speaking clients, getting them on our distribution list on WhatsApp. And I won't talk too much about this because I don't do that and I don't understand WhatsApp, but I do have a staffer that I work with who does. But just like looking at what are all those different channels that provide us with opportunities to connect with folks that we might not otherwise. And I think another thing that has really become top of mind in this era is the need for, and you mentioned this earlier in the context of a different question, but really like looking at the intersections of our work with other movements and with other topics. I think that is more essential than ever for us to really highlight because A, we know it's all interconnected, and B, it then provides us an opportunity to plug into a conversation that is really active and happening and to provide this additional perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, Jess. Thank you for saying that. It's, I think one of the things some of us who did sort of maybe take a journalism class a long time ago or are ever told is, how do you make sure that news is relevant? How do you make sure you remain relevant? And to remain relevant is to make that connection for people. Sexual violence or, the work that we do to prevent this sort of harm in our communities is a part and parcel with so many other things that also require attention. And I love that, especially with COVID-19 or the pandemic at large, or a lot of the demonstrations that were occurring across the country over the summer. We didn't take a step back. We demonstrated how even in this space, this is also unfortunately an outcome of this type of unrest, of this type of inequity. And so to make that connection over and over again, I think was an opportunity we had to take.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much. That was very, like a very rich conversation, and I feel like I have so many follow-up questions. But we might have to schedule another podcast if you're interested, because I think there's also a lot to say about what stories are not told in the media, and maybe some of those other like non-traditional or non-mainstream media channels are an opportunity for those stories to be told. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'd love to continue that conversation, but I know that we've had you for quite a while. So Tori, I'm going to pass it back to you to ask our final question.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ashley. And yeah, I think we will be in touch for another podcast to talk about all of these different ways that people can tell their stories. So thank you both for being on this one, and can't wait to have you on another. But before we let you go, do you have any other final takeaways or advice for messaging sexual violence prevention now in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, or just in general that you want to pass on to our listeners?
Ooh, thanks for that question, Tori. Honestly, the first thing that came to mind was we see this term a lot. 2020 brought with it unprecedented challenges. And the truth is, it's not 2020. I think there will always be challenges. There will always be things we thought we knew or we had figured out that will be challenged. And so what has been the most important thing for me to keep in mind has been to keep an open mind, to understand that the way I've done things is not always the most effective way, and to continue to learn from my peers, to continue to learn from others who are also working through this space is really the one takeaway that I would really share with others, is that understand that this is constantly an evolving space. And when it comes to messaging, when it comes to doing the work that we do and communicating it, it is okay to change your mind about your approach. It is okay to learn from things that have gone well or have not gone so well, and to adapt and to try again. And so that would be my takeaway.
Absolutely. I'm like, adapt. That should just be our motto. Adapt. I think that just the two things that come to mind for me is just reinforcing that handy tool of pivoting in interviews. I feel like I can't say that enough. And then something that just occurred to me, and this is something that we talk a lot about at the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center, is just like keeping vicarious trauma in mind. I think that when you are in this field but not doing direct service work, you can forget the toll that reading the news and talking about this issue can have. And it really does. And I think that we just need to like give ourselves grace and time. And if you need to turn off the news, honestly, where I'm at is I know I need to read the news at work. So that's when I'm going to do it. And when I am off the clock, that is my opportunity to play with my dog and watch bad TV. And so just to all the folks who are doing communications in this field out there, I just wanted to offer that and solidarity.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. Jess, it's so true. I think work-life balance has taken on a different form in 2020.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you for that validation coming from someone who has left Facebook forever in the past 9 months. So yeah, really appreciate the conversations that we've had on this podcast. Thank you both so much for being here. Ashley, did you have anything that you want to add?
Just a great big heartfelt thank you, not just for the conversation that we've had today, but for the value that you are bringing to this work. It is just, we need people with these skills and your background to be in working alongside, all of the other work that's happening, whether it's in prevention or intervention. I mean, it takes all of us, right? That's what we hear so often in prevention, and it's really true. So thank you both. And yeah, Tori, thank you. This was a great conversation.